Good evening. This is the regular meeting of the Planning and Development Committee for June 8th, 2015. We do have a quorum. May we have approval of the minutes of the May 26th meeting?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections? Seeing none and seeing no lights, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Items for consideration tonight, we will begin with P1. Alderman Nguyen, would you take P1?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item P1, Ordinance 66015, Amendments to Design and Project Review, the DAPR Ordinance. City staff recommends adoption of Ordinance 66015 to institute minor cleanup revisions to the DAPR Ordinance. I move, this is for introduction.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Alderman Fisk, did you get a chance to read it to make sure what you wanted and it was included?
Yep.
All right.
I just had one quick question.
Go ahead.
I think that was about the blue light phone.
The blue light, if it was included?
Yes, it was included. All of that new language is included.
Yes, it was there.
Right.
Okay. It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Alderman Fisk, is this P2? Sue Carlson, do you want it?
No, it'd be 3.
3 or 2?
On the inclusionary housing.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, go ahead.
Do you want me to go ahead? Okay, it's Ordinance 51015, zoning ordinance text amendment for firearm ranges. The Plan Commission and staff recommend approval of the zoning ordinance text amendment to create a definition and land use regulations for firearm ranges. And this is for introduction. I move introduction.
It's been moved in second. Alderman Fisk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had, I would just like to ask staff to explain the rationale for having this ordinance. It was discussed in the Plan Commission, but I think maybe the public is not aware of why we're doing this.
Sure.
Because I think there are many people who say, why are we even allowing firing ranges in Evanston?
Sure. Good evening, Michelle Mason-Cup, Deputy City Attorney. I'm happy to address that issue. The Firearm Concealed Carry Act was enacted, and recent City of Chicago case law has been ruled on to indicate that the city cannot sit silent on this issue any longer. And we have to address it. And if we don't address it, the reality is that we could be facing an application where the location could be in a location that you would not desire, and that the city could not have the regulations that we have in place for this ordinance. So we are trying to protect you as much as possible and to put in locations that we think are appropriate. And the ordinance addresses many issues: ventilation, operational concerns, environmental concerns, noise issues. It is all-encompassing of what we think is relevant and appropriate.
Alderman Tindem?
Thank you. I know this is only for introduction, but in the meantime, could you maybe check the area? I noticed an area that I think it's in pink, and I question whether it was noted as it's a park area that is operated by Skokie, the dog park, and the adjacent area where the rowing teams put their boats in, and there's a huge facility there, which looks to be in the pink zone. They don't necessarily show up on our maps because it is Water Reclamation District property that's, has, I guess they have a contract with Skokie. So if you would check that out, I'd appreciate it.
Is the park in Skokie? I mean, is the property in Skokie?
It's on the east side of the canal, so I think that's Evanston's jurisdiction, but it's, Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. They have oversight of the park, but we do pay for use of that park. For the dogs.
Alderman Tenda, we will check the map
Just check
again.
it if you would, please.
Yes, in consultation with Skokie's ordinances as well.
And the rowing place too. That's
Will do.
really big facility. A lot of young people there all the time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There are also probably any citizen that looks on and sees the map will see that some of it in the pink area look very close to neighborhoods, but we'll have to explain why that happened. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The areas in pink they include areas outside of 350 feet of an R1, R2, or R3 district. The R4 and R5 districts are included just because if we don't include them, then that creates an all-out ban on this regulation. But I do want to call attention to the fact that this is still subject to a special use application. It still has to go through that process, which is extensive, as you know. And so that's the answer to that question. So any pink highlights, for in your wards specifically, it's more Darrow and Emerson, I believe.
Right. Okay. Alderman Grover and then Alderman Tindem.
Just to pick up on what Ms. Mason-Cup said, as hard as it is for any of us to imagine that there would be an operating firearm range in Evanston, aside from the one in our police headquarters, which is used obviously for legitimate law enforcement training purposes, that just because our land use regulations seem to allow the possibility of a firearm range, that it does go through a pretty elaborate and extensive process only as a special use. And so it's not as if anybody could come in and apply for a license to operate a firearm range and be granted a license. There are land use issues involved, and it's a complicated procedural process.
Alderman Tindem.
I'll decline. Thank you.
Okay. All right. It's been moved and second. All in favor? Any opposed? Just for introduction, yes. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, on P3, amendments for the to the proposed inclusionary housing ordinance 60-0-15 and the development of other revenue sources for affordable housing. We'll have a short presentation from our staff, and then I have a list of residents who want to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Mark Munzer, Director of Community Development. I'll turn it over to our staff in just a second. I just wanted to note, as your agenda item calls out, we are seeking direction from you this evening. We're not looking to move an ordinance tonight. What we have done is we have responded to your list of questions from the April 27th meeting, and thank you for those questions because it exposed us to a lot of great national and regional examples of how communities are best handling this issue of providing affordable housing within their municipality. So that will be referenced in the staff presentation. Again, thank you for these questions. It really brought to light a lot of information for us as we continue to struggle what is a loss of affordable housing in our community. So I thank our staff, as I always do. They did an excellent job on preparing the information, and I'll turn it over to Sarah Flax and Marilyn Poole.
Alderman, when do you wait? Okay, great.
Good evening, Chairman Holmes and members of the committee. We are going to take you through a brief presentation of the information that we provided in the package, largely in response to some very good questions, as Director Munzer pointed out. So our goal is to get direction in order to move forward on revisions to the inclusionary housing ordinance and on any other methods to expand revenue for affordable housing. Housing that's affordable to people at a wide range of incomes, including workforce housing, improves Evanston's sustainability and supports our goal of being a livable city for all residents. A strengthened inclusionary housing ordinance can help by providing much-needed affordable housing, a consistent approach to development, including a level playing field for the developers, and transparency and understanding of goals and policies for our community. In addition, new sources of revenue to fund affordable housing can help share the cost of maintaining an inclusive and welcoming community more equitably. We've seen these numbers before, and you asked some good questions about them. What are the 40% loss of affordable housing units? Between 2004 and 2013, excuse me. A number of factors account for this. Between about 2000 and 2009, we had a lot of rental units that converted to condo. In fact, there were about 600 of them in that time period. Those were rental before that, so that reduced our rental supply. We did have new construction. We didn't lose units overall. We had approximately 1,800 units of new construction in this time period, but that was primarily luxury housing in the downtown area. So those were gains, but they weren't gains in affordable units. The housing crisis and the foreclosure crisis really also affected affordable housing. Tightened credit requirements that followed that crisis resulted in fewer people qualifying for mortgages, which increased the demand for rental. So it's kind of a perfect storm. You've got a decrease in rental, but an increase in the need for rental, which allows a rapid rise in rents because the market can command that. And at the same time, incomes were stagnating for many of our residents, especially in lower wage jobs, so people have to use more of their income for housing or even to double up in some cases to keep housed. So the impact of high housing costs. What is it? Well, it's not good. Ideally, a household should spend no more than 30% of gross income on housing, which allows them funds for other needs, transportation, food, everything else. Currently, 28% of Evanston renters, which is 3,410 households, and 10% of owners, or 1,715 households, are spending over half of their income on housing. So 5,125 households, these are people who are already living in our community, are extremely housing cost burdened. That 30% is the ideal, they're over 50. A single incident could be a medical emergency, it could be a broken down car that needs repairs, can destabilize them financially and even result in losing their housing. I'm going to turn this over now to Mary Ellen Poole to provide additional information on ideas to address that.
Recently, good evening, I'm Mary Ellen Poole. Recently, City Council has responded to the need for affordable housing by requiring affordable units, plus a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund in recent planned developments here at 1571 Maple and 1620 Central Street. A strengthened inclusionary housing ordinance combined with other revenues for affordable housing builds on this momentum. Evanston is not alone in addressing this need. We found a number of cities with inclusionary or affordable housing ordinances, many of which are being revised and strengthened. In March of this year, Chicago passed a revised version of its affordable restriction ordinance. This places a stronger preference for units on site, allowing only developers to buy out 75% of those with fees in lieu. Their fees in lieu range from $50,000 to $225,000 per unit, depending on the location and the tenure. There are much tighter restrictions for developments located in transit-oriented development areas, recognizing the importance of having affordable units close to public transit. Based on this research, staff recommends the following. Expanding the definition of covered developments to include new rental and ownership construction and condo conversions of 10 or more units. Increasing the affordable requirements to 20% of units in developments with public funding and maintaining the overall 10% of units as affordable and covered developments. Pricing affordable rental for households at 60% of the area median income for 25 years. Maintaining affordable ownership units in perpetuity. And raising the per unit fee in lieu from $40,000 to $100,000 in zoning districts with density restrictions and to $75,000 in all other districts with multifamily. Responding to Alderman's concerns that the proposed amendments to the inclusionary housing ordinance did not provide strong enough developer incentives to offset the requirements of providing affordable housing, staff proposes additional benefits when affordable units are constructed on site. Adding development bonuses of 10% height, 10% in floor area ratio, and 20% in density, which is the number of units based on lot size, in addition to existing maximum site development allowances. Reducing per unit parking requirements by half to 3/4 of a space based on unit sizes, and developers can use property standards code to establish the minimum sizes of affordable units based on unit type. The benefits in the current ordinance would still be maintained are expedited review, which is the cost of time, waiver of building permit fees for affordable units, and payment deferral until the temporary certificate of occupancy for market rate units, as well as the option of making an equivalent alternative proposal. The impact of those benefits are really significant. Using the recently completed 356-unit E2 development as an example, if 10% of those units, so approximately 36 affordable units, the combined fee waiver and deferment would be approximately $184,000. And there's details in A2 of your packet. The financial benefits of the additional affordable housing development bonuses have also been calculated. In the larger development example, the bonus would increase total units from 75 to 114 units. In ownership, the return on investment decreases by 1.3 percentage points, and in rental, that net annual income decreases by only 2.2 percentage points. With a smaller development, the bonus would increase total units from 12 to 20. In the ownership example, the return on investment decreases by 0.8 percentage points, and in rental, the net annual income decreases by just 0.1 percentage point. Please note that these are high-level examples using consistent assumptions across all the scenarios just to illustrate the difference in the developer return only. The calculations are shown in detail in attachment A4. And finally, Aldermen also voiced concern that the inclusionary housing ordinance places an unfair burden of funding affordable housing on developers and ultimately the residents of those multifamily housing developments. Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Marin County, California are addressing this with impact fees on commercial and residential development that is not subject to the inclusionary housing ordinances. Other communities use a portion of business registration fees, document recording fees, real estate transfer taxes, and property taxes to raise funds for affordable housing. An analysis of commercial and single-family housing development could be undertaken, as well as a review of potential fees and a recommendation developed as a separate action from this IHO and brought to the committee for consideration.
Okay, Alderman Nguyen.
Madam Chair, did you have citizen comment?
Yes, I do plan to do that.
I can wait till after that.
Okay, fine. Alderman Grover?
I just want to clarify that this item is on our agenda marked as for action tonight.
It's not for action.
But as Director Munzer says, it's for continuing discussion.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And direction.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. We have a number of speakers, and I'll call you 4 at a time. Please take about 2 minutes so we can allow everyone to have a chance to speak. And if the speaker before you have said what you wanted to say, we'd appreciate if you would yield that time. Okay? We want to start with Jennifer O'Neill, Brandon Sanders, Rob Anthony, and Steve Perkins.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer O'Neill, and I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Evanston. The League strongly supports inclusionary zoning to expand affordable housing of all types across the city. Considering the dramatic loss of affordable units over the last 10 years, especially rental units, the League urges serious consideration of the proposed amendments. We understand that inclusionary zoning will not solve the affordable housing crisis, but it is a valuable tool and a very good start. We urge the committee and council to also consider the proposed incentives to developers, and we encourage the involvement of stakeholders in the discussion to ensure the success of a new ordinance. This includes elected officials, staff, citizens, advocates, and developers. We support rental units remaining affordable for at least 25 years and ownership units in perpetuity. We also suggest that the revised ordinance require that staff monitor the units to ensure they remain affordable. Property owners and managers should be required to qualify inclusionary zoning residents by income and submit annual reports in a consistent format, and the city should have the ability to audit those records. The city should consider dedicating funds for this purpose to enable staff to collect and evaluate data. The new ordinance should be reviewed at least every 5 years to determine if it remains effective in meeting the needs of Evanston. The League has been, as you know, a strong advocate for affordable housing for many years. We support policies and programs which increase affordable housing opportunities for persons with low and moderate income. The development and rehabilitation of Evanston's housing stock for both purchase and rental. We encourage family moves from high income or high poverty neighborhoods to lower poverty areas, recognizing that such moves often offer improved quality of life, with opportunities for better health, jobs, and safety. We are asking committee members to seriously consider the proposed amendments and work with staff to create a strong, effective ordinance that creates affordable housing across the city and increases the number of affordable rental units in Evanston. And we thank you very much for addressing what we consider to be a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brendan Saunders from Open Communities. We're located at 614 Lincoln Avenue in Winnetka, Illinois. We cover North Suburban Chicago and do fair and affordable housing advocacy. Jennifer said it all. I will leave it at that. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rob Anthony. I'm the Executive Director of Community Partners for Affordable Housing, and I also live at 2416 Lee Street here in Evanston. I will not repeat prior comments either. There are a couple things I would like to add. One is that as Director of Community Partners for Affordable Housing, I've had the opportunity to administer inclusionary housing firsthand. And one thing that we've learned that I've not heard discussed yet is when an inclusionary or final inclusionary housing ordinance is approved, it is very important that as you implement that, there is a very sincere and thoughtful plan to educate developers about the ordinance itself. And I receive a lot of calls at my office from developers who, when they first call me, their response or their thought is that each affordable unit is going to cost me $125,000 per unit because that's the fee in lieu amount in Highland Park. And so that's how they often perceive the cost to them. And it's not until we sit down with them and really go through some of the cost offsets and really work with them on their pro formas that they then understand the real financial impact is often very minimal, if at all. So when an ordinance is finalized, it's very important to make sure that's marketed and well, and that developers are very well educated on that. The second point is that there are also a lot of good national resources that are being released very soon. There's a webinar at the end of this month that the Cornerstone Partnership is doing on inclusionary housing. They've also developed an inclusionary housing calculator. If you participate in the webinar, they will give you access to this calculator later on in July so that you can actually try to understand the financial impact that inclusionary housing may have on a development. So there's some very good resources out there. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, other members of the committee, I'm Steve Perkins. I live at 1127 Hull Terrace. I'm on the board of Citizens Greener Evanston. We are justifiably proud at the progress that Evanston is making on becoming a more sustainable place, setting climate action goals and meeting them, and moving, I think, pretty rapidly toward a walkable, more compact, livable city. And the rising cost of housing is what are the costs of that? I mean, we create a more desirable place. People are able to pay more, or willing to pay more, or some people are willing to pay more. But I want to raise another a related issue on affordability, and that is the access to transit. We've seen a trend over the last 10 years that the number of affordable housing near transit has gone down. So that actually, in my mind, represents another tax of people who have limited means because they are have less access to affordable transportation. So you have a situation where people who need transportation the most are being pushed away from it, and people who are getting to live near transit will benefit from it, but don't need it quite as much. So I think we need to think about the relationship between housing affordability and transportation affordability together, and that the adopting an inclusionary zoning ordinance is actually can be a step toward both of these at the same time. So we really endorse doing this, and I'm very proud that Evan's taking another step towards sustainability. Thanks.
Thank you. Is that Adrena Nicola? Howard Handler, Adrian Willoughby, Elizabeth Meadows, is that Meadows? I think it's Meadows.
Okay. All right. Hi, my name's Drina Nicola. I live at 2008 Keeney Street in the 9th Ward. And I'm also here as a member of the Age-Friendly Evanston Task Force Subcommittee on Housing. I come from a background in senior living design and an interest in housing for seniors. One of the things that I have been looking at as we've looked at different solutions for senior housing is, particularly in my ward, we have a lot of single-family homes that are right on the edge of foreclosure, or there's poor maintenance. Particularly as I walked around my neighborhood at the end of Madison Place, there's about 6 houses on that block that we could potentially consider putting into a land bank. And that's one of the things that's mentioned in the inclusionary housing, but it's not really like fleshed out. So even as Mary Ellen was talking about some of the shared costs, whether it's costs from or support from a land bank, but also the in lieu of fees, we could potentially get a cluster of housing that really works for seniors. It's on ground level, they're small, near the Levy Center, that sort of thing. So I'd like to be able to have us consider that as part of this ordinance, the single-family housing. Thank you.
Hello, Howard Handler with the North Shore Barrington Association of Realtors. My comments are also going to be super short as well. We have had a chance to review the agenda packet, but we would like more time to study it, to talk with stakeholders, to better understand the impact this proposal would have on Evanston real estate. So we do ask that not to cement any proposals tonight, but to allow greater community discussion among stakeholders on this ordinance. The one thing our association would encourage you all to consider are also more organic approaches to affordable housing as well. So I know the mayor, Mr. Munzer, have also talked about tiny, allowing more micro housing. A lot of communities like Winnetka and Lake Forest are allowing greater ability for coach houses and kind of what are referred to sometimes as granny flats. Looking at regulatory barriers, I think Evanston has a prohibition on below ground apartments, impact fees, transfer taxes, permit fees, things that are increasing the cost of housing in Evanston. So we'd like to put that on the radar as well. But in summary, we would like to be part of this overall discussion and would like to include more stakeholders in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Adrian Willoughby. I'm with Reba Place Development Corp. We're affordable housing non-for-profit based here in Evanston. And we're really excited you guys are looking at this, and especially with what the staff brought back with alternative means of funding it. I know a lot of your concern at the last meeting was about it being prohibitive for developers. And on the other side, being the small developer and as a not-for-profit, our struggle is we have to bundle financing from multiple places. So not just the city, but whether it be IDA or Community Investment Corp. So it's a much larger hurdle in a way for us, whereas a large developer can go to a bank or two to secure their financing for their projects, and they're able to generate some of that funds back via sales and secured rentals. So I'm excited. I'm glad you guys asked a lot of great questions last time, and please proceed forward with what you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Meadows, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a member of St. Paul Lutheran Church here in Evanston, as well as a member of Interfaith Action of Evanston. And just briefly, I just want to reiterate my support for the support of the amendments to this ordinance. I really thank you for considering these amendments about inclusionary housing, and just to reaffirm that I believe, too, this is not the solution to Evanston's affordable housing crisis, but it's a big step in the right direction. And Last, I would just like to affirm what others have said, that I request that the amendments include bonuses to foster development within Evanston, and that you have meetings with stakeholders and draft an Evanston-specific ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jane Wickenkamp, I believe it is, and Barbara Sitter, Sue Carson. And I have a scratch out. Is Jeremy Smith? Did you want your name scratched out? Okay, great.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jane Wickenkamp. I'm a resident of Evanston and a senior citizen on a fixed income. I agree with what has been said with regard to the inclusionary housing ordinance and the amendments. And I also agree that while it may not be the perfect solution to Evanston's affordable housing crisis, it is a strong first step. And I would urge the committee to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Sue Carlson. I'm here to speak on behalf of the work that the staff has done to improve the 2007 inclusionary housing ordinance. However, I have to say that I'm dismayed and perplexed by the introductory statement from the staff that, quote, since its approval in 2007, Evanston's inclusionary housing ordinance has not resulted in the development of any affordable housing units or contribution of fees in lieu to the Affordable Housing Fund. I've been hanging around this issue for a number of years, and I'm sure that I remember there were some developers who pledged fees in lieu. And so that leaves me with a question about enforcement, an enforcement concern. Are we not following through with pledges that developers have made? I'm concerned about that. I'm also impressed by the options that the staff has presented that would indicate that, in effect, the other residents of the proposed residential buildings, nor the developer, would be financially disadvantaged by the creation of affordable units. With the affordable housing development bonuses, as indicated by staff, on top of the existing maximum site development allowances, plus the proportionally reduced fees for each affordable unit created, would allow the developer to add to his potential return. So, in effect, it's the city that will have foregone funds to underwrite the cost of the affordable units, not the other lessees or purchasers in the buildings. And nor would the developer, as has been pointed out, have to reduce his profit by a substantial amount. So I urge you to move forward with this revision expeditiously. Please don't put it off continually, so that we can have hope for increasing the affordable housing units in town to relieve the pressure on those of our residents who no longer find it possible to live in our community.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey, do you want to wait till after?
No, I don't want to wait.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I think that statement needs to be corrected. We do have money in our Affordable Housing Fund. In fact, one of the examples given earlier tonight was E2, who did not qualify under our ordinance to make a payment in lieu or to provide affordable housing, did make a $200,000 voluntary contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund. I mean, that's one. I think the Mather also made a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund. There are others, yes or no?
Yes, there are others.
Because what's going to happen is that statement lays out there,
Right.
and then everybody piles on it. Well, let's correct it while we can.
There have been other contributions to the fund. A lot of our contributions are through a demolition tax that is levied when single-family residences are demolished, and there's a $10,000 fee that's paid into the Affordable Housing Fund. But there have been several larger developments that have made contributions to the Affordable Housing Fund. They just weren't required to do so technically under the previous ordinance. So that when we say that none have been created, it's technically none have been created under that ordinance, but we have had contributions from numerous developers in the ensuing years that have made contributions. And yes, E2, the Mather, the two most recent ones, 1571 Maple and 1620 Central.
Thank you. And I think that brings up a very important thing for us to discuss going forward, and that is, why, when we have an ordinance, did it not catch any affordable housing requirements? We need to look at that. It seems like the ordinance wasn't really working.
Well, I think maybe for our next meeting, we can have a list of those so that the residents will know who they were and what the amounts were. So that's an easy thing to provide. I'm sorry, Ms. Sittler, go ahead.
My name's Barbara Sittler. I am the Executive Director of Senior Connections here in Evanston and a member of the Age-Friendly Evanston Housing Task Force, and I live at 825 Ridge Terrace. And I just want to say that I support and hope that you move forward on this proposed amendment. I also support very highly the suggestions made by the League of Women Voters. And I just want to remind us all that many of the people who are losing out here are people who have been the pillars of our community, who have been born in Evanston, raised their families in Evanston, created the Evanston that we now enjoy, and now that they are at their retirement years and on fixed incomes are having to leave the Evanston that they created. And that this is an issue that is patently unfair, and it reflects very poorly on who we are moving forward. So I'd like to remember all of those people who would benefit from this program, but to lift up those who have made this city what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our citizens' comments. And I believe, Alderman Nguyen, you were the first light that I had.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say thank you to Mary Ellen Poole and Sarah Flax for this tremendous amount of information that they prepared for us in response to a number of the questions that we have. It demonstrates what a complex issue we're facing here and that many municipalities are facing in light of what happened with the loss of affordable housing. I think that we need to do something, but we need to make sure we do something right, that we work on this and make sure that whatever we enact works. There were many forces in effect over the last 10 years or 9 years that have resulted in this loss of 40% of our affordable housing. The Great Recession, wage stagnation, as has been discussed, and those are very large, complex issues that we can't necessarily solve, but we can certainly, as the League of Women Voters said, start to work on this to the degree that we can. There are a number of questions that were raised by the information that the staff prepared that I have, and I know a number of other people have, I would like to propose that we have a workshop on this issue where we can dig into more of these issues and understand them better. I'd like to have the City Council address this at a single meeting or perhaps two meetings that are devoted solely to this issue. What I would like to do is have the staff look for that type of meeting date for us. I think we need to get all of the stakeholders at the table, as, for instance, Highland Park, my understanding is from the materials that the staff has provided us, they are re-examining their affordable housing ordinance with a group of stakeholders. I think it's really important for us to get major developers at the table so we hear from them as well, and also members of the finance community, because frankly, it all depends on whether you can get financing in the end. And so it's really critical for us to have those people at the table talking at the same time, talking with us through some of these things. In addition, I think it's important for us to all understand what the development bonuses do, and perhaps we can discuss how they work and if there are other development bonuses that we want to substitute or provide an array of. So as you can tell, there are a lot of good issues that have been raised. A number of the speakers have raised additional issues. So what I would like to propose to the committee is that we pick a date for a workshop and that we structure this so that we can discuss a number of these issues in much greater detail, taking some of the suggestions from the speakers that we have and some of our own questions. That at least I have a number of questions based on the material as well.
Okay, I want to just put a little placeholder right there for a minute because I have some other lights, and then we'll come back to that. Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important, as a lot of the speakers have said, and you suggested as well, Alderman Nguyen, that we keep this on the front burner, that by moving the conversation to a workshop or two, that it doesn't mean that it's not still on our agenda for action, unofficially or officially for action. I wondered if the League, having issued a policy position on this, means that they couldn't help us with a workshop. I think the League would be really well positioned to help us either with facilitate or to organize a workshop, a really good one, and as you said, involve all the stakeholders. So thank you to the League, and thank you for staff for putting together such a great presentation on the important question.
Okay, Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It's a very complicated issue. It's been going on for many, many years. I'm a little bit concerned about the League, as much as I love the League, having them organize a workshop for a sitting city council committee. So I have a little bit of a problem with that. I think we can do it. I think we're smart enough to be able to do it. So I wanted to answer a couple of questions. Or a couple of comments, Mr. Handler, to you, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because we've just had, there's an ongoing development at the old Kendall College site that is 19 new single-family houses. Most of them, except one, all have coach houses with dwelling units in them. So, and as my understanding is, Preservation Commission and city staff, was that these were built as of right.
Correct, but they're only allowed to be utilized by members of the household, as it stands right now.
Okay, that I wasn't sure about. The other thing is that we apparently do allow basement apartments, and that was something new to me because, like you, I thought that we didn't, but apparently we do that.
We do.
And my other focus really is on single-family houses. I think there are a lot of single-family houses. The lady who spoke, I think, prior to Mr. Handler, who was from the 9th Ward, who referred to that, there are areas I've discussed with Alderman Holmes in our community with houses on them that would be wonderful scale-down houses or starter houses. And I think that we need to do whatever we can to make those not only habitable but affordable. And that's something that I would very much like to do because that's a good starting place for working families that need that assistance, and also a place for folks who are coming out of maybe a slightly larger house to step down into and stay within our community. So it's not just the larger buildings. I am worried, concerned about some of the bonuses. I think it's an excellent idea to have the workshop so that we can flesh some of this out, and we'll keep it moving forward. So thank you, Alderman Nguyen, for that suggestion.
Mm-hmm. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. And one of the things I guess I'm interested in seeing more specific and detailed information on is data on where and why housing that's affordable is being lost. So if we can get a better grip on exactly where that's happening. For example, the new developments, a couple of the new ones that have gone up, it hasn't taken away any housing. The empty lot at Davis and Maple, it's an empty lot, so that didn't take anything away, but that developer did, with negotiations with the city, certainly we negotiated hard and diligently, but there was, I think, a $400,000 contribution and a commitment to provide some affordable units. But one of the problems I have with this ordinance, and the first problem I have is the name, Inclusionary Housing Ordinance. I feel like it's a little bit of a misnomer. But setting that aside, I want to be doing something that's impactful. And when I look at what Highland Park has done, they've got an ordinance that's not too dissimilar to this. But in looking at the information we got, I think there were 24 units created over 14 years. That is not very useful. A few weeks ago, a number of people talked about Portland, so I've actually done a bit of research on my own to see what the impact is there. But they I don't know if it's a crisis, but they have a serious problem that their ordinance is not addressing, and that's really more tied to the idea of gentrification. They have developments that are taking away housing that's affordable. Chicago, in reading about the 606 Old Train Line, great idea, bike path, improve the commute. However, it's pricing a lot of people out of the neighborhood, and it's forcing people out of the neighborhood. So not only are the property values going up, some people can make some money, but that entire swath of land is now not affordable, whereas it was previously. And that's the kind of information I want to see. Putting a couple of units here and there in larger projects, I really do not think will be impactful. For example, a developer could come into Evanston and pick a couple of blocks and tear down. They could tear down 40 houses, okay, 40 single-family houses, and pay $400,000 in tear-down fees. Okay, that's 40 properties that would be lost, and that contribution is the same as what one high-rise developer's already put in. So it's a good start and it's an important conversation, but I don't feel that this is impactful as far as the end goal is concerned. It's useful and it's a starting point for the conversation, but I think what we really need to do is kind of reset the thinking and look at why and where are we losing housing. And in my own vision, and maybe I'm delusional, but my vision would be for Evanston to have quality, affordable market price housing, and to look at our zoning ordinance and think of how we can make that zoning ordinance allow for quality, affordable market rate housing. That would be great. People could come to Evanston, buy a home, and not have to necessarily worry about all of these calculations. When you talk about the bonuses, that will be impactful on the neighbors. One of the things that I talked about last time was who pays. Okay, so cash out of pocket, maybe this won't have as much of an impact on the actual neighbors in the building, but it's still, the four walls. If we eliminate the parking requirements, if we allow them to build a couple of additional stories, if we allow them to fill up the footprint, that is impactful on the neighbors to that one particular piece of property. And to me, that's not a community-based program. That's a targeted tax on a very finite number of people. And really the people in that building, if it's a rental building, rental properties are generally, by definition, it's the idea is to have more affordable property, right? The property on Central Street that we recently approved, they've committed to, I think, 2 affordable units. But when you do the math on that, it's really tens of dollars a month discount. That's not really that impactful as far as helping people. So I want to do a lot better than that.
But to your point on that did not take away any affordable units, because you're talking about right at Central and
right.
Broadway.
Right. But I mean, we can sit here and we can say, oh, this is great. We've created 2 affordable units, but the definition of affordable in that context is not very impactful. I want to create a real and realistic impact. And to your point, if we include more members of the community, and you can't just talk to developers. Developers are going to come in and they're going to try to keep their baseline. Okay, what's my baseline? What's my profit margin? What's my return on investment? They're going to try to keep that number the same. So you have to look at neighborhoods. I think you have to look at neighborhoods and think about where are we losing affordability and why, and how can we create a better environment for everybody in Evanston. So with that as a really long background, I support Alderman Nguyen's suggestion that we continue the conversation, but include more of the stakeholders.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. I think almost a more important question than where are we losing affordable housing is where do we want the affordable housing? And we may be losing it in parts of Evanston, but the question of where we want it, which I hope means everywhere in Evanston, is the larger question. That's the harder problem to solve, is how do we get affordable units, rental or ownership units all over Evanston? And as Mr. Perkins said, I think especially near transit-oriented development because of the transportation benefit to our middle-income families.
Okay, seeing no more lights, Alderman Nguyen, do you want to come back now with your suggestion Alderman Tindem, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't have my light on, but I would like to, hopefully we can do this in a quick, not quick, but a pretty steady, manner, like Ms. Carlson said. I think this is, keeping it on the front burner is one thing, but actually the time that sometimes these things take to regroup is pretty lengthy. So I'd like to see this maybe on a schedule like the Harlan Clark, which we gave them a 6-month or something that.
I don't think we need that kind of time.
At least it was a defined period of time, and they had set up certain benchmarks, certain goals, and I think we should really stick to a pretty aggressive schedule.
I think that Alderman Nguyen was talking about maybe if we could do something in July, maybe we'll take one of our off Mondays and to do a workshop. That would be my suggestion so that we can get it done as fast as possible. I just think that we've kicked this can down the road too long enough, so we just need to move on it. So I don't have a calendar if anybody has the off Monday for us in July. Alderman Wilson.
I'm sorry. And I guess just to reiterate, so people know that we are committed to this, when we have had these developments, we are negotiating to include these things. You know, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. E2, the Maple one, the Central Street one. This is something that we've made a priority. So even though it's not a requirement that people do this, we are asking for that and negotiating for that, you know, as we go along. We're not pushing it to the side and waiting. We're actually continuing with that conversation and bringing that in while we have this discussion.
Right. Director Munzer, or Alderman Nguyen, did you have a light?
If Mr. Munzer would like to say something.
I was just going to suggest a date.
Okay, I was going to make a motion. Do we need a motion or just direct staff?
Actually, I don't think we really need a motion. I think we all agree that we want to do it. We just have to find a date.
Yeah,
that will be.
I would suggest that we look at the off Monday, and then give ourselves a lot of time. We may need actually more than one meeting because this is a very significant ordinance, and we want to make sure it works right. I also wanted to point out that the Sienna development also included affordable housing.
They sure did.
And part of the reason why, the reason why we originally drafted this was because we had different developments giving different amounts, and it was causing confusion in the development community, and we wanted to create a standard. Then, unfortunately, the recession rolled around, and nothing was built in Evanston. So I think now we need to re-examine this and figure out ways in which we capture more, because back then there was no rental housing being built in Evanston. Now there's only rental housing. Back when we first enacted this, and you're going to tell me one or two developments that did.
Yeah.
Okay. 415 Howard. I stand corrected. That's right. That was a lot.
Okay. Alderman Grover, and then we'll get to Director Munzer.
Just taking a look ahead at our January calendar, we don't have a spare Monday.
January.
Or July. July calendar.
Here we go.
Sorry.
Here we go.
I think I can.
That wasn't the hurry-up schedule, but can we just direct staff to identify a date for us to schedule a workshop?
Let's listen to the director and see what we can do.
So as of now, it could potentially be June 29th, which you have an opening. I will say I think there may be a staff availability issue with that date. The other potential option is July 20th. I believe you do have a.
No, we have city manager's evaluation.
We couldn't. So that's closed off the
That's
whole time.
closed.
Okay. Then we'll have to look at some dates and.
So July
respond.
29th would be a problem for staff. Is that what you're saying?
June 29th.
June 29th.
Yeah, but I think we could cover it. Frank, I'm not going to be here, but I believe Ms. Flax and Mr. Tinovich will be here. We can cover it. So I would say tentatively we could plan on June 29th, and we can confirm it later in the week.
Excuse me. Does that give us enough time
Is
to
that the
bring in?
fifth Monday?
Yes.
Yeah, that's 2 weeks.
Does that give us enough time to bring in the stakeholders that we want to bring in? Give them.
Well, I mean, I would assume that the staff could contact potential. We must have potential developers out there that you'd like to contact, and financial institutions in the community. Staff could certainly let them know, and we can maybe run something in the Evanston Now, the roundtable, the review to let people know. So it's a couple of weeks. I think that's. Yes, 3 weeks. I mean, I think that's time. Don't you think we could do it? I think we could do that.
Okay. I have it on my calendar.
Okay. All right. So we will hold this in committee until the 29th of June for our first meeting. And I'm saying first meeting because we don't know. We may have to set another date after that, depending on where we get. If there are other stakeholders that you think you would like to see involved, then please tell them. We'll probably have to do this up in the Parasol room so that we can have enough room for workshops and work groups. But that would be my thinking right now. would be in the Parasol Room on the 29th. And we'll start probably around maybe 7 or 6:30? 6:30, maybe a little early if we can. All right? But we will send out a notice. Okay? All right. We have then, those are all of our items for consideration. We do have lighting regulations for discussion. Who has that?
We can address it real quickly.
Okay,
this was an aldermanic reference to investigate some potential changes to our lighting regulations. In essence, we have an administrative policy that regulates light glare on from one property to another, particularly as it relates to open areas and parking areas. And that policy does not allow for any foot candles or any glare, 0-foot candles, onto a residential property. Also, our green building ordinance, which applies to developments that are 20,000 square feet and higher, that has what's called a dark sky light fixture component to it. So any permits that we are received that fall under the green building ordinance, they must supply us with fixtures and show us a lighting plan, a photometric plan that shows that there will not be any glare, particularly as it relates to, or solely as it relates to residential properties. We've also provided you with a series of research on other communities. I will say that it's a multivariate approach to this topic, but generally, as it relates to us, communities from residential onto residential property, you're going to see something where they don't allow foot candles to be illuminated onto those properties. And I will just give the caveat, that is administered by the Public Works Department, so that policy is included in your packet.
Alderman Fisk and Alderman Rainey.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Munzer, for this. It grew out of a concern about just lighting sort of sprawl. Going on to various properties from adjoining properties, a whole bunch of citizen complaints over the years, basically our hands being tied in some circumstances, but really looking at how to improve the overall quality of life in our community in terms of trying to have a peaceful nighttime existence, but focused on task lighting. So it's not reducing the lighting, it's making the lighting more efficient so that when the police come by and they need to see between buildings, they can see between buildings, but it's not shining into someone's apartment, for example. So it's making things more effective. There have been huge advances in lighting technology. Not everyone takes advantage of those, but we can certainly be a leader in encouraging and regulating this in our community to just make our community more user-friendly in terms of how light is distributed throughout various neighborhoods, and especially when you look at parking lots and you look at gas stations and where the glare is just so strong that it really does bother people who are trying to sleep nearby. So like I said, it's not reducing the lighting, it's making the lighting task-oriented and making it more effective.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes. I'm wondering, Mr. Munzer, are all of our parking lots and facilities in compliance with these guidelines?
I don't know that, Alderman Rainey. I'm assuming they are,
we
but
need
we
to
can
get out there
verify
and
that.
check on that right away.
I would assume so, but I don't know that.
If there are private entities such as gas stations not in compliance with these regulations, are we going to begin issuing citations? Is there going to be a period of time when people can comply?
We'll investigate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And would you let us know before we start citing people?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Alderman Grover and then Alderman Fisk.
We recently had issues at Lot 4, which is the parking lot at Central and Stewart. It's the new parking lot that was reconfigured a couple years ago with new light fixtures, but the new light fixtures turned out to be pretty bright, highly efficient, and our Public Works facilities crews have MacGyvered hoods to many of those light fixtures so that the glare doesn't go into the apartment building that borders the parking lot. So there are ways for city staff to fix some of the light overflow without a whole lot of cost.
Right. Alderman Fisk?
Yes, and that is a good point. I remember when the Maple Avenue parking garage was being constructed, you would come down Ridge, and the view of the back of that parking lot was just a glaring mass. And with the use of some of those hoods, it's now quite pleasant. So it's, again, for a very small cost and easy retrofit, that can be done.
All right. Okie dokie. Any communications?
Yes, I do have one communication. Unfortunately, when we get together next time to talk about the inclusionary housing ordinance, Mary Ellen Poole will have moved on. She has accepted another position as a very great opportunity with a nonprofit here in Evanston. So as we all know, in the time that she's been here, she is smart, she's professional, she knows housing, and I would just like to thank her.
Thank you. Well, the good piece is that she's not leaving Evanston. So absolutely. We're happy about that. Okay, that concludes our agenda, and I guess City Council will start immediately.